Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us if you're in the U.S. this afternoon, evening if you're overseas. And thank you so much. I've got my tea. I think you have too, right?
I have. Here's my tea here. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, cheers. For those of you who are watching, what we're going to do is I'm going to have a little chat with Anne. And while I'm doing this chat, you can put any questions in the chat feature. And John McDougall from Murder by the Book is going to be relaying them to me on my phone. I'm not, checking Instagram. If I look down at my phone, it's going to be to get some questions from you all. But I guess without any further ado, let me get Anne introduced and we'll get to chatting. So Anne Cleeves is the multi-million copy and New York Times bestselling author behind two hit television series, the BBC's Shetland, starring Douglas Henshaw, and ITV's Vera, starring Academy Award nominee Brenda Blethyn, both of which are watched and loved in the U.S. The Long Call, right here, the first in the Two Rivers series introducing Detective Matthew Venn, was an instant New York Times bestseller. She lives in the UK, and she's with us today to talk about the most recent book, number 9, in the Vera Stanhope series, The Darkest Evening, of which we have signed copies for those of you interested. Hi, Anne. So glad to be chatting. How are you?
I'm fine, yeah. I find these Zoom meetings quite tiring, and I did one to Australia very, very early this morning. So it's lovely to be in America. How weird is that? We can travel the world in a day.
I know. It is one of the few upsides of this current global crisis is that we have all figured out how to actually have these events virtually. And I know we have a lot of people who are actually watching from all over the world who figured out how to get tickets to see it. So it's pretty fun. And of course, who knows if you were going to come to the store for this book. I'd like to think so, but at least this way we can chat.
It's great.
So this is, as I said, a new book in the Vera Stanhope series. We're finding that on these virtual events, often people are watching them who might not have read the author before, or they might read a couple of the books. Can you tell us a little bit about Vera in general, and then where she finds herself in this new installment?
Yeah, Vera is big. She's single. She's a woman of a certain age. She has great authority within her team, and she doesn't care at all what she looks like. And I think she grew out of some of the formidable spinsters I knew when I was growing up. I was born in the mid-50s, so not that long after the war. And there were a number of very formidable spinsters in the small town where I lived who'd either lost sweethearts during the war or who'd been given roles and responsibilities that they might not otherwise have been allowed because they were women. And I think she grew out of those women who decided they would rather be single than be 1950s housewives. And in The Darkest Evening starts, it's winter, midwinter, and there's a blizzard. Vera, driving home, just loses concentration and loses her way because the snow is so thick, and ends up on a path that she's never been on before. She doesn't recognize, with forest all along one side, and sees a car that's slewed off the road. She thinks it's been caught in the snow, and goes to investigate, and the driver's doors open. Apparently nobody there, and then she hears a cry, and there's a child in the back seat, and that's how it starts.
That sounds good. I love any book that has a blizzard. You've got me with blizzard, but yeah, it sounds fabulous. Those of us who've been reading your books for years know that every time there's a new Anne Cleeves, it's a treat. But leading into that, there are now 3 different series that you've written with 3 clearly different main characters who seem fully realized, and some of whom maybe have their own little issues with society. How did they come to life? Did they come to you fully formed, or did you work at building characters?
I think Vera came pretty well fully formed. The first time I describe her, she's looking more like a bag lady than a detective, and she's carrying all her notes in a supermarket carrier bag. So I think but I got to know her over the 9 books, and that's the joy of writing series. I think that characters can grow and develop, and you find a lot more out about Vera's family in The Darkest Evening, so you have much more of a sense of where she comes from, I think. And Shetland, yeah, Jimmy Perez came out of an idea I had just because I know Shetland, I'd lived there, and there was a Spanish Armada ship wrecked off Fair Isle, which is the island that I know best. And so it seemed quite a nice conceit to think that he might have been descended from those people. So he had the strange name, a Spanish name, and the dark good looks. So that's how he came about, I think. And he too is a loner. And then Matthew Venn came because I was in North Devon. That's where I grew up. So again, it's a place that I know very well. And talking to a friend who'd grown up in a very strict evangelical community. And just thinking about somebody perhaps who'd lost their faith and who had been, they call it unfellowshipped, but cast out by the community, might find in the police service that sense of duty and honour and family, almost of redemption that he lost through losing his faith. So that's how he came about. So they all have different stories.
Well, I think it's their, I don't know, lack of a better word, realness, the fact that they are so fully formed and they have their flaws and they have their baggage that makes people love them, because they're not superhero detectives or fully, self-destructive, your classic conceit of the alcoholic self-destructive detective either. They're just people that you feel like you would know. So obviously, again, you've had a lot of world building with these different series and different locations. How do you keep that straight?
Well, I only write one at a time, so I don't get too confused. And I'm not going to be writing any more Shetland books. I saw that there were some questions about that. The Shetland series is finished. There are only 23,000 people live in all the Shetland Islands. And so I think I've explored all that I want to explore about Shetland. I still visit and I still go back, but I don't think I want to write about it anymore. So I've really just got 2 series that I'm working on. And I like that. I like coming to the end of a book and thinking, that's great. I can go down to North Devon now and write about Matthew, or finish a Matthew Venn book and think, time to come home and spend a bit of time with Vera. So yeah, I like doing that. And I think the stories and the characters grow out of the places. So I do feel myself in those places when I'm writing them.
So speaking of the places, and you've alluded to this and already said it specifically about Matthew Venn, but did the characters come first or the setting come first? And what are your experiences with the 3 settings that are as much a character in your books?
I think the settings always come first, but not just as a pretty backdrop to the action. I think the characters grow out of those places. My daughter is an academic. She's a human geographer. And I think that's what I do. I explore the individual within his or her community. And that community is about the people that they meet, but it's also about the landscape that they find themselves in. So setting always comes first. And I've spent time in all of them. I lived in Shetland for a couple of years and have known it for 40 years. So I've been going back for a long time and still have lots of good friends there. I grew up in North Devon, only left when I went away to university. And then I live in Northumberland and we moved here in the mid-80s, and I obviously know it very, very well. And The Darkest Evening is set in Northumberland, in rural Northumberland, which is still quite feudal with big houses and tenant farmers. So it's a very, very beautiful but very unique place to be.
Well, I think you take us there each time, and I think it's a skill that you have to make all the settings so different and make your character so different. Do you find it hard to adjust to the different voices?
No, I don't think so. I do try and spend a bit of time in each place before I start writing. And that's partly just to get a sense. Really, it's about eavesdropping, so listening to people's preoccupations, sitting in cafes when that's possible, but just getting a sense of what's going on and what people are anxious about in each of the places. And then also getting some sense of the rhythm of the voice. I don't write in dialect, but in each region, we have different accents and different words for things, and just hearing that again, just to get a sense of the place in the voice too, is quite important, I think.
That makes perfect sense. So many of you probably do know Vera, either through the books or the television show, which we'll get around to later. But I also have here with me today, new in paperback and many weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, The Long Call. Could you tell us a little bit more about this book in case people are wanting to try your new series and they haven't yet?
Yeah, so this starts off with Matthew Venn, who is my detective. It's his father's funeral, but because of and he's back in North Devon where his family lived, because he was estranged from them because of his lack of faith. He doesn't feel that he'll be welcome. So he's standing there listening to the funeral take place, but not being brave enough to go in and be a part of it. And then his phone rings and there's a murder that he's investigating. And one of the reasons why his family find it so difficult to accept him back into the fold is because he's gay. And so he lives with his husband, Jonathan. And that was quite tricky. And people say to me, oh, were you just trying to be politically correct? Or did your publisher ask you to do that? And it wasn't that at all. It was my husband died just nearly 3 years ago. And the people who scooped me up and looked after me and were there for me were our great friends, a gay couple, Martin and Paul. And so really they were in my heads when I started writing, and they appeared in the book. But I was very worried and quite nervous about appropriating somebody else's experience, and 3 gay couples read it before it went to print. I did want it to be as authentic, but it's the first time I've ever written about a happy marriage, and I loved writing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you did everything you could to not, make mistakes and to represent that lifestyle as well as you could. And I think it is interesting that you have them as your first kind of happily married couple. But I think it's fantastic because as we discussed, all your characters kind of feel like outsiders to society. So it's certainly appropriate that he might feel that same way, especially with the evangelical background. So, many of the people at the store absolutely loved this new series, and my mom read it, and she also just is a huge fan. So she's out proselytizing for Matthew Venn.
Well, I've just finished the first draft of the new Matthew Venn, so that should be out this time next year.
Excellent. So I was about to ask, obviously we're in strange times now. Have you been able to write, been able to focus, and it sounds like you have?
Yeah, it was a bit strange, especially at first. And for the first 11 weeks of lockdown, I had my 11-year-old grandson, Ollie, staying with me because he was just out of hospital. He's chronic asthmatic, quite seriously poorly quite often, and has to take steroids. So that made him vulnerable. And he's got 3 siblings. And so it made more sense for him to stay here where he could have his own bedroom and his own bathroom, and we could keep an eye on him. He's been home now for a while, but so yeah, it was quite interesting that first 11 weeks. There was Ollie and I at the kitchen table, and he was homeschooling and doing all his schoolwork, and I was there telling the story of Matthew Venn. So yeah, that's
great. So you've just finished that, and what is rattling around in your head now? Are you about to start another Vera?
Another Vera will come next, but we're not quite at that stage yet. Yeah, I'm still tweaking the new Matthew Venn.
The new Venn. So is your process that you have a lot of ideas kind of already for books that are coming ahead, or is each new book, okay, I need to come up with a new idea?
Yeah, each new book is something new, and I might have an idea that I want to explore, or a sort of theme, or a specific place that I want to write about. But that might fester away at the back of my head, but until I'm there and ready to start writing it, nothing really gels.
All right, so we always have a lot of questions about the writing process. What does your average writing day look like, and do you have any specific routines like music or beverage or anything like that?
I get up very early, so I usually start writing 6 o'clock in the morning, and I drink lots of tea, being British, and I sit at my kitchen table with a laptop and I just tell the story as it comes. I don't plot in advance, don't plan in advance. I don't have lots of I don't know, post-it notes everywhere. It's all in my head, and I just tell the story as it comes. Like a reader, I write like a reader. So I write the first scene, and I need to like with the darkest evening, it's Vera finding the child in the car, and then I need to write the next scene and the next scene until I more or less know what's going on. But that takes halfway through the book before I've got any idea how it's going to end.
So do you ever reach a point where then you realize, oh, I have to go back and set this up then?
Just change a bit, or yeah, absolutely. But it's surprising how little really that I can usually find my way through all right.
Well, you've been
having to change too much.
You've been writing for some time. I'm sure part of that is just practice, sit down at the table and do it. Do you have
I think so.
Yeah. Do you have a daily goal, like a word count, or do you just get to a natural stopping point and feel good and move on with the day?
Yeah, I try and do about between 1,200 and 1,500 words a day, but I'm not. After that, I tend to lose concentration, and I think concentration is the one skill that a writer needs, because if you can't keep that world focused in your head, you can't expect the readers to focus there either.
Yeah. Well, everyone wants to know about the TV shows too. So how has your experience been? Let's start with Vera. I know that you and Brenda Blethyn get along well. How much involvement did you have with the casting, with the writing, and how has your experience been with that?
Sorry, I think I'm losing you.
I think you're coming in and out. You might be back now. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so because I can see you're not frozen anymore, so I think we're good. So I was saying with regards to Vera, I know that you and Brenda Blethyn get along very well. How much input did you have with casting and screenplays? And can you talk a little bit about your experience with the TV show?
Yeah, I don't have any influence in anything. Once I'd met the executive and the team that were making it, I understood very well that they understood the characters and they understood what I was doing, that I was writing. And so I decided that I had all the fun writing the books and really loved doing it, but that the creatives in television should be allowed that same freedom. So I just gave it to them and let them go.
Yeah, with it being such a different format. For those of you watching, if you're concerned, Anne's screen is frozen, but I think she'll be back. Anne, I just want to check that we can hear you. Can you say something?
Sorry, did you not hear me?
We did for a minute, and then you froze again. I was just making sure that you could hear us.
Yeah, patchy, not terribly well.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm going to text John and see if it's on my end. So pardon the interruption really quickly. Actually, he's watching, so he's going to let me know. He's already typing. We'll see how it goes. So let's see. We do have a lot of questions from the audience and a little bit of housekeeping. If you tuned in a few minutes late, we're going to be emailing everyone a link to watch this as a private video on YouTube. It'll be a private video for ticket holders for the next month, and then it'll be public. So like I said, if you tuned in late and you missed something, or you need to pop out and rewatch something later, we'll get that to you shortly. Almost all the orders of Darkest Evening have been shipped out already, the signed copies. So you should be getting those shortly. And I'm going to check back here. Okay, so apparently I am fine, and it's something with another connection. So, okay, sorry about that. You know what? Why don't we take some questions? Because I know that my phone has been just ringing constantly with all of your questions. So let's get to some of the audience questions, and then I'll come back to some of my own in a little bit. So Priscilla was wondering, how has Vera evolved as a character, or has she just maintained an essential core? Would you like me to repeat the question? Are you there? Hello, Anne? All right, everyone, we're going to give this just a second and see if it comes back. Let's see. And we have lost Anne. I bet she's restarting. The fabulous thing about being able to do this is technology, and the bad thing is technology. Anne, are you back with us?
I am. Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. You are now moving and not frozen. So we're going to say that that's better. I was just saying that technology is a blessing and a curse sometimes. Okay.
It is.
So back to the question that I don't think you were able to hear. Priscilla was wondering, how has Vera evolved as a character, or has she maintained an essential core?
I think she has got that essential core. I think she's mellowed a bit over the years, and perhaps that's partly Brenda's influence, because I think Brenda has made her a little bit softer, a little bit gentler than she is in the book. So yeah, she has mellowed a little bit over the years, I think, but essentially she's there. She's the loner. She's haunted by her father, who was very neglectful of her, and that stays with her throughout all the books, I think.
So Diane asks, and I believe you've already answered this, she might have asked before we got to it, but in case you want to expand on this, what is your personal connection to the Northumberland area?
I live here, moved here in 1987 and love it. I absolutely love the northeast of England. If you've seen the show, it's filmed here. So it is long horizons, lots of empty space, beautiful, beautiful beaches, not too many people.
And I know what we were talking about when we had connection issues. So we were talking about Vera and the TV show. Now, obviously, we've also seen Shetland, which is fabulous. But Matthew Venn, has it been optioned? Is it going to be a show?
It's been, yes, Matthew Venn has been optioned. It's obviously with the virus, it's very tricky because filming has been cut back a lot, but and I don't know whether it will actually be made, but yes, it has been optioned. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Get a commission.
Now, you were saying that film is a different media than the books, and you kind of let them do their own thing once they have the spirit.
Yeah.
Shetland is wrapping up as books, but is that going to be continuing as a TV show?
Yes, absolutely. They're filming again in the spring. So they were all set to film when we had lockdown. So the crew were actually in Shetland ready to film there, but and had to come back. But yeah, it's all scheduled for next year. So and Vera, all being well, we'll have the whole cast and crew back in Northumberland very soon at the end of this month for filming again.
Oh wow, that's wonderful. So do you ever visit the set?
Oh yeah, but I made quite welcome because I don't interfere. I let them get on with it. We get on very, very well. So, but I think that they know how to make good television and I don't. So I'd much rather just leave them to it. I've had the fun writing the books. I don't want to write the scripts. I don't particularly want to be involved in the television. So yeah, I think that having that they got the character, got the sort of moral tone, I think, of the books, is captured. That sense of kindness really is kept in the shows as well.
Yeah, I think that's probably smart and the best for everyone, just having that that bridge. There are a few writers that I know have managed to visit the set and be very, very, very actively involved, like Michael Connelly with Bosch. I think he does a fabulous job, but he is there all the time. I think some of the best, well, also some of the worst failures are when the writer gives over control and then lets people take it. But I do think, you know, they've maintained the spirit of Vera, and that's the most important thing.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I'm much more concerned about that than the details of plot.
Yeah. So we have a question. Has Shetland tourism increased because of the TV series?
Yes, it's gone up 43%.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you also must be made to feel like a queen when you visit Shetland too.
Well, I have great fun when I go up. I've got so many friends there, so it's lovely to go back.
That's fantastic. Jane is wondering, what is your favorite book that you've written, and how do you read? I don't know exactly what that means. How do you read? But what is the favorite book that you've written? Oh, who do you read? That must be what it means. Who do you read?
It's always the last book. So at the moment, it's the Matthew Venn that I've just written, because that's what's in my head and what I'm living through and so it's always the last one. I don't really have a favorite. And I just read whatever I can get my hands on, really. But I do read a lot of crime. And what's the most recent? The most recent book I've read that I loved is called Summer Water by someone called Sarah Moss. And it's not really crime fiction, it's literary fiction, but get hold of it, it's brilliant. It's only a slim volume, but it's a wonderfully written, just beautiful.
So before people put this in the questions to repeat the title, I'm going to ask you to repeat the title and name again, please.
Summer Water, which is all one word, Summer Water, by Sarah Moss.
Okay, perfect.
It's won all sorts of prizes here, so I'm sure it'll be available there too.
Okay, fabulous. So I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through these questions, but a couple of them we've already answered. Dana wanted to know, what was your inspiration for Vera and her tough on the outside, soft on the inside personality traits? But that's the 1950s ladies, right?
Yeah, those women that came after the war, I think, who were very strong and very competent and didn't suffer fools and, could rule the world given half a chance. They
were in such an interesting position because they had all these new roles during the war that after, when the men came home, they didn't have those roles again. So I'm sure it was very hard to go back. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So Nate was wondering, what kind of research do you do? I have 3 great advisors. I have a friend who is the senior crime scene manager. I have another friend who's a forensic pathologist. He's based in Aberdeen, and if there were a murder in Shetland, he would do the post-mortem, the autopsy. And I have a great friend who's a forensic soil scientist who's very good on how you can tell where people have been from the mud on their boots, and they help. Otherwise, I just make things up. Do you have any favorite stories of things you've learned while doing research? Any tidbits? In the new Matthew Venn book, I kill somebody by stabbing him with a shard of glass. And I had a long conversation with Professor Grieve, James Grieve, the pathologist, about the sort of glass and whether it would shatter if it hit a bone, or whether it would be strong enough to kill somebody. And so he's very good on helping me to kill people. And I will have to read the new book to figure out how that glass holds up. So again, we have a question from Teresa. The natural setting for all 3 series is bleak. Which came first, the crime or the location? And you said setting. It's always absolutely first. The location always starts off with that. Yeah. All right. Mark was wondering if you could talk about your bibliography project. The bibliotherapy project, maybe. Yeah, this is something that we're doing here in the Northeast.
there's a lot of health inequality. You know, if you're poor, you're likely to be in poorer health. And we were considering this with some medics and Public Health England and libraries in the Northeast and what we might do. And because reading and libraries are my thing, I think that if you have chronic pain or you have mild anxiety or depression, reading can help. And so we're working in 5 different local authorities, and I've sponsored 2 project workers, and then that's been match funded. So we've actually got 5 project workers, and doctors will prescribe a meeting with a reading champion so that people who are suffering like that will get, instead of being prescribed only medication, they'll be introduced to somebody who can maybe get them reading for pleasure again, to help them escape. Because I think if you've got lots of chaotic thoughts going in your head, or there's lots going on that's unpleasant in your life, getting inside somebody else's head in a piece of fiction can help. And so that's the project, and it goes live in January. And we've got a research grant, so we've got 2 academics who are actually going to write a report and do a peer-reviewed evaluation at the end. So we'll see if it is worth continuing.
That sounds wonderful. You know, I have a background in music, and music therapy is such an amazing thing too. So it makes perfect sense that books would be, that's a worthy endeavor. Thank you for doing that. That sounds wonderful. Yeah. Well,
it'll be fun. Well, it's Vera's is 21 this year. The first book came out in 1999, so it's a sort of 21st birthday present from Vera to the region that formed her.
Oh, that's great. So have you noticed in reading and writing much difference between the UK and US procedurals?
I don't read a lot of procedurals generally, so I'm not quite sure. I think, you know, the books that I love are people like Sarah Paretsky, where it's a private investigator. So it's I'm trying to think if the last time I read a police procedural, probably not for ages, not an American one. So I can't really comment.
It's funny that you write British ones, but yeah. So who are some of your favorite authors, mystery authors?
Mystery authors. Oh, there are so many. I love Louise Penny, who has also become a friend. So we did a little tour together last year, and that was great fun. I'm just trying to think of who I've read recently that I was really bold. A great British author called Mick Herron. I don't know if he's very well known there. Yeah. Who is just fabulous. Yeah, he's a great, and he comes from Newcastle too, from the northeast of England as well. There's a newish writer called Kaz Frears, who does write police procedurals, and they're just very witty, and she's got, I think, a unique voice. So she's brilliant.
I'm a big fan of hers as well. I think it is nice. Good. The voice is very fresh. Her 3rd book's about to come out here. I think so. Yeah, but
Shed No Tears. Yeah, it was one of my favorite reads of this year.
Yeah.
Kaz Frears.
Yeah.
Let's just ask him what's her name. Kaz Frears. C-A-Z and then F-R-E-A-R-S.
I'm betting John is all over this and about to drop a link to her first one in the chat. So just for those of you trying it or looking for that, we'll have more information coming soon in the chat. We'll also be doing an event with her. It's not a ticketed event. It'll be on Facebook Live on December 1st. So mark your calendars, and we'll be having a chat with her at that point. She's very funny, witty, just like you would expect from her books. Let's see. Are the Vera books available as audio, and who reads them?
Yes. They're read by a woman called Janine Burkett, who I think is brilliant. She's been shortlisted for all sorts of awards. She lives here in the Northeast. Her accent isn't too off-putting for people, but I think it feels very authentic to me. I think she's a great reader.
So we also have a question from Kat. What is your favorite kind of tea, and how do you take it?
I like just Indian tea, but I also like Earl Grey tea in the afternoon. So it's Earl Grey tea that I'm drinking now, and I take it with a splash of milk.
My husband would be all on board with the Earl Grey tea. In fact, we bring in, all we drink is Fordham and Mason Earl Grey. We pay the stupid charges to get it over here because it is his absolute favorite. And so that is, I'm good with not Earl Grey all the time, but he would drink it all day long. Let's see here. So is there much change between the US and UK books? Do they make changes for verbiage, sweater, jumper, that kind of thing?
No, I don't think they do. We'd have to find out from the publisher. But I'm very lucky because Pan Macmillan, my English publisher, is in the same family as St Martin's. They're all part of the Macmillan group. And so I actually get joint edits back from the two editors. So that means that I only do one edit for both territories, which is brilliant. And I get two different sets of eyes on the book as it comes in.
That is helpful, I'm sure. So you've written a lot of books at this point. Do you have a favorite motive for murder?
I don't think so. I don't like writing. I don't write monsters. So really, my murders are not right at the heart of the book. I think I write about ordinary people who are pushed to limits, but they can't, or they lose control in a way that a lot of us do, but it doesn't always end up in murder. So I that sort of motive for murder could be something actually relatively trivial. And what I'm exploring is the psychology of the person who takes that to such a degree that they're prepared to kill for it.
Yeah. How did you decide to become a writer? That was a question that just popped up.
Yeah. I think I was always a storyteller. I was always someone who was a little bit outside looking in. You know, one of those kids is on the edge of the group rather than really participating. Certainly until I could read and write, I can remember a running narrative in my head in the third person describing what I was doing. So I was always there looking down, interested in the story rather than wanting to be part of the action. And that stopped when I could read for myself. But it was always, that was how I explained the world, was by turning it into a story.
Well, you've been telling stories for some time, and this, well-deserved success has been a long time coming. Can you talk a little bit about the pre-Vera books, the George and Molly or the Inspector Ramseys?
Yeah, I was writing for 20 years before I had any commercial success at all. And I was successful, I was being published a book a year, but wasn't desperately successful with them until the first of the Shetland books, actually, that brought me a bit of recognition. The George and Molly books, they're very golden age. So George is an amateur sleuth. He's retired. He's an elderly person interested in natural history. So he's tripping over bodies in nature reserves and on bird watching trips. So that's him. And then the Inspector Ramsey books are, I suppose they're very much a prequel to Vera because they're set in Northumberland and they're similar sort of tone and feel, I think. They're police procedurals. I might be misremembering, but were the George and Molly books set off the Gulf Coast? Were they off an island? There was one set in Texas called High Island Blues.
That's right. Yeah. I remember that when I first started working at the store. I think it was maybe still in print, and it was a big seller because it was set in Texas, and we didn't have that many books set in Texas. Yeah. So I came and did a signing there years and years ago when that came out because they were published in the States. Yeah, absolutely. I remember. I wasn't there for the signing. It predated me at the bookstore, but I do remember seeing and selling copies of that book for watching that in Texas. Yep, absolutely. So who did you read as a child? Do you think someone you read was that influenced that narrative going on in your brain?
Yeah, I think it was. I read lots of mysteries, so I did read Enid Blyton, a wonderful writer actually called Malcolm Saville, who is also Mick Herron's favourite children's author. So we share a love of the Malcolm Saville books. That sort of pacey story right from the beginning. Though I would read anything, absolutely anything that I could get my hands on. But it was that mystery that hooked me right from the start.
I was talking to someone the other day who also was British and said Enid Blyton, and I think the U.S. equivalent of that here is Nancy Drew. We didn't really have the Enid Blytons, but so many people moved from Nancy Drew to Agatha Christie to other crime fiction. So I think it probably was a universal children's mystery thing in the UK that we didn't get. After having 2 conversations about that in the last week, I think I'm going to have to track down one and give it a read.
They're not very good. I did move on quite quickly.
Is there any chance that your series characters will have a crossover at any point?
The only thing I can think is maybe for a comic relief. You know, we do a fundraising comic relief once a year, and you can maybe see Jimmy Perez and Matthew Venn and Vera working together on a case as a sort of spoof just for a bit of fun. But otherwise, I don't think so.
I think you should do it to raise money for your bibliotherapy. Yeah,
that might be. We've got that funded though, to touch wood. We're all right at the moment for that. We'll see how it goes.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned Sarah Paretsky. What is it about the kind of American private eye genre that you like?
I think Sarah Paretsky is just a great writer, and she's not afraid to tackle difficult issues. I suppose someone like Laura Lippman, exactly the same. I love her books too. So it is those strong, great women writers that I love.
Both of them, I think, start from a place of theme and some issue that needs to be addressed, and then build that mystery around it. And, I personally appreciate that. I know Paretsky has at times, had feedback for being a little bit too political, but I think you have to write what you believe in, and that comes through in her books. So I certainly respect that.
I think so too.
Yeah. So if there are any more questions?
I'm just thinking that I wanted to mention Laurie Raider Day as well, because each of her books is different, but they are all, again, so interesting, such interesting premise in them.
Yeah. We like her a lot too, and she's been winning a lot of awards and getting acclaim for her standalones. Well deserved.
Yeah.
Well, if there are any other questions in here, make sure to pop them in the comments. I think we're probably going to be heading back to our tea and ending this shortly. So how is your overall outlook right now? How are you feeling? Is everything good in life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky because I'm here and I've got a garden and I've got my house and I live right on the seashore, so I can go out for walks and things. We got our COVID right down, but they're starting to go up again now because, life has to get back to normal and kids are going back to school and people are going back to work. So whereas we were really on top of it, it's starting to get up, and we've brought in nationwide restrictions again that we can only meet as 6 people, can only meet together, and just trying to keep a lid on it. I think it's a lot easier here because we do have a national government that makes these decisions rather than the state making them. So we'll just have to see how it goes and be careful, and everybody please be safe and look after yourselves.
I know it's such a novelty to get to talk to someone without a mask on virtually. We've just opened up the store. We're still closed during the week for browsing because we're doing, fortunately, knock wood, so much curbside and mail orders that we are very busy all week long. So we're working Monday through Saturday. We're there for curbside pickup and mail orders, but only customers doing appointments on Fridays and Saturdays. And it's been an interesting thing having that for the last couple of weeks because, you know, we're rusty at hand selling books. We're rusty about talking about books with people, except for those who've ordered over the phone. So it's been fun, but I'm too concerned that overall we're looking at a problem with schools reopening and everything. And being in Texas with, you know, as you were saying, with the state leadership, we haven't really had any overarching mandates to keep us from doing things. So hopefully Houston had a horrible problem and now seems to be going back down. So hopefully we'll be able to stay there. So back to your book. Sorry about that detour. How do you know when you're done with a character?
I knew that I didn't want to write about Jimmy Perez anymore, just because, as I said, I did 8 books set in Shetland. I'd explored all that I wanted to say about the place and the man, I think. So I always want to stop before I get bored and before the reader gets bored. Yeah. So stop just before you think you should, I think. It's
like company. You always want to leave when you're going to be missed instead of overly staying. So Scott asks, the Shetland series shawl, that's not easy to say, Shetland series shawl, how did this happen, and are you a knitter?
I knitted when I was in Fair Isle, because if you're in the island of Fair Isle, you have to knit, and I have lots of friends who knit and who work in the textile museum. And I was supposed to be going up for Wool Week, which is the big celebration of all things knitting, but that was cancelled because of COVID. So my knitting days are long past, I'm afraid.
And who would you say is the favorite character you've written? Not necessarily main character, can be anyone. Favorite character you've written?
Yeah, I'm actually going to go for a character that I didn't write, but that appears in the television. So Tosh is Jimmy Perez's sidekick in the TV show. And but she's brilliant. And I've got to know the actress very well, Alison O'Donnell, and I think she's a brilliant actor. So yeah, I really wish that I'd written her. So she's my favorite character, but I didn't write her.
That's a great answer. So for all of my interviews, I like to end them with some questions from the Proust Questionnaire, not terribly difficult ones. For those of you who don't know what that is, Marcel Proust was, in the late 1880s, came up with this list of questions to get to know people better, you know, at cocktail parties, etc. So I'm just going to give you 2 or 3. They're not terribly dark or hard. What is your most prized possession?
My most prized possession is a map. It's a map of a bit of Northumberland. And after my husband died, I wanted to run away, and I bought this cottage up in the wilds. And both he and I really don't like the idea of second homes, because we think that there should be homes for everybody. I felt dreadfully guilty, and I knew that he was a bit of a raggy socialist. You know, he would be mortified at the thought of me buying another property that I didn't need to live in. And I came home, but I fell in love with this cottage. Came back, got out the map to see just where I'd looked at this house, and the square had been marked, and he'd marked the square on the map where the cottage was. Before he died, you know, and I think he must have done some bird watching or something there, but that sort of said to me, he's giving his approval, that's all right, I can go by the cottage now. So that map is framed up on the cottage wall.
That's wonderful. That's a great story. You know, sometimes weird things happen and you just know this. What is the trait that you most value in a person?
Kindness.
All right. And then the last question that we're going to end with today is, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
Perfect happiness is a long walk with good friends.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. As I've said, we have copies, obviously we have copies of the new series, first in series, with Matthew Venn, The Long Call, and we have signed copies of The Darkest Evening, which is the brand new Vera Stanhope. We obviously always stock Anne's books, so if there are any others you need, feel free to give us a call or order online. And we are thankful for you tuning in. We're also thankful to the people at Minotaur Books, especially Sarah, your lovely publicist, who helped getting this all set up. And we have a few other events coming up soon. Next Sunday, we'll be talking with Richard Osmond, who does the British quiz shows, in conversation with Alan Bradley, who writes the Flavia de Luce books. So I think some of you might be interested in that. So check our calendar for that one. And I guess that's all I have for everyone. Thank you again so much. Thank you, Anne. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. No, it's been lovely chatting to you. And thank you to everybody for listening in.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Bye.